Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about how to increase cash flow in rental properties. Most investors I know kind of it's almost like they set it and forget it, and they think about it when renewal comes around, or they think about it when a repair happens. But ultimately, what you can do as an investor is increase cash flow on your properties. And so probably this is something you should look at least every 12 months. So let's get into it. I'll show you what I mean. First thing is just adjust rent. Now, this may be pretty basic, but honestly, it's really something you need to decide, because sometimes you may be in a place where you want to keep the rent the same simply because you don't want that resident to leave or to get spooked and say, hey, I got to get out of here. But it's really interesting. Over the past 4 or 5 years, we've seen some pretty strong rent increase just based on demand and lack of supply. However, the past 2 years, we've seen a softening of the markets kind of come back to normal. And so these are the types of things you need to keep in mind. You need to think about the market. So if you haven't raised rent in the past 5 years, you're probably due. And so this is just something you always have to think about. I would say, now I had a resident in a couple of my properties, 2 different properties that were over 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And on 2 of them, one of them I didn't raise rent at all. And the other one I may have raised it once. But it was all because I just wanted to keep them in the property. I was fine getting the rent that I had. I wasn't interested in upsetting the apple cart, but there's other rentals that I did increase. And so you just really need to think about your market. I would say this is something we get asked all the time as a property manager. If you have a property manager, I would be asking, what are they seeing in the market around your property? It's more than likely that they are managing properties near you, and they can give you a pretty good idea of the comps. And so, you want to definitely look at similar rents. You could upgrade some amenities. This would typically happen on the turn. However, you need to understand that in a certain market, if the houses are basically the same, then there's only so much you can do to raise rent, because the rent for that area is probably going to be set. We were just sitting down talking to some folks that manage a lot of build to rent. And what's interesting is the build to rent communities, they're all single family residential, but they're all rentals. And you start changing rent on some of them or not going up on some, and then all the neighbors start talking to each other. So you just have to be careful. Make sure you make the right decision for you. During the turn is probably the best time to raise the rent, if it needs to be raised a good amount. Otherwise, smaller incremental raises are good. All right, what about reducing operating expenses? This is one that most people don't think about all the time. They usually think about raising rent, but they don't think about operating expenses. Now, this is a great picture because preventative maintenance is so very, very important. I can tell you there was a friend of mine who did not clean out his gutters, and it ended up eroding. The water got behind the wall, eroded their soffit and fascia, ruined it. And so they had to replace the whole soffit and fascia around the house. And it was probably $5,000 or something like that. So could have had $200 gutter cleaning every single year and not had to replace the fascia and soffit, which doesn't add any value. It's just like, you never want to do that. But if you're not laying eyes on the property, or if you're not thinking about it, you should be. You should be thinking preventative maintenance. HVAC is a big deal. Gutter cleaning, roof inspections. HVAC, the last thing you want is July 4th, the air to just go out because you haven't serviced it. It's well worth the however much, $150, $250, $300 that somebody's going to charge you to come do preventative maintenance on that. I would probably do it once in the spring, once in the fall. If you're in a climate, in an area that has like big shifts in the climate, hot summers, cold winters, that might be a good thing to do. You can check appliances and plumbing, but it's usually pretty good to service things, to do preventative maintenance on your property at least once a month. It avoids big expenses. And so you're reducing the operating expense. If you went back over the past 5 to 10 years of your rental property, I wonder how much of the work you've done could have been prevented. So just a good question to ask. Another one is increase resident retention. Now, we all know you lose cash flow when somebody moves out of that property. So how can you keep a resident in the property the longest? I'll never forget sitting down with a seasoned veteran investor. He also managed around 1,200 properties in Atlanta. And we were talking, and he said he recently had moved a resident out, and the resident had been there for 20 years. And so we just started talking about, how do you keep somebody 20 years in a house? Because that's pretty good. And so he just went through all the different things that he does, or he did. He's retired now, but he did things like had carnivals for his residents and made all of his vendors pay for it. He sent gift cards. He wrote notes. I know people who actually give gift cards around the renewal, say, hey, if you renew, I'll give you a $250 gift card to Target or whatever. I know people who do that, but increasing resident retention is a huge, huge deal. You don't want to have that property vacant. So be responsive. Offer incentives for long-term leases. If you can do a 2-year lease. I know people who do 2-year leases, maybe they reduce the rate a little bit, but it locks them in for 24 months. We typically just do 12-month leases, and that's worked for us. Again, you could offer a $100 discount on the second year of the lease or something like that, but increase resident retention. There's all kinds of different things that you can do to build good just to build good relationships with that resident. And I would do all those things. All right. Minimize vacancy periods. Now, this is a big deal because most people, if you own one property, two properties or whatever, you don't necessarily probably have people available who are ready to go at a moment's notice. And so what I would do is, if you look 90 days out, you start reaching out to your resident and say, hey, are you going to move out? Are you going to renew your lease? If they say, hey, in 90 days, we're going to move out, probably 60 days out, I would start lining people up and say, hey, I've got work for you. I want you to be able to do this. You're probably talking about paint. You're probably talking about cleaning carpet, if not replacing carpet, those types of things. Turns usually are not all that expensive. What's really expensive is the vacancy. If you don't get on this, you can sit there and the property will be vacant for, could be, a couple, 2-3 months. And that's not what you want, and you don't really want to show it before it's ready in most markets. If you're in a really super hot rental market, then that might be okay. You can start showing it even while the resident's there. We don't recommend that. We like to show properties in the best light possible. So minimize vacancy. Again, schedule cleaning, maintenance immediately after the resident moves out. Market effectively online. Like, I would put a sign in the yard. I would take great photos. I would write a great description. You can offer incentives even in your marketing. We know people that offer a $200 off the first month's rent or the second month's rent or something like that. Whatever you do, market it effectively. What can you do to make it stand out from the competition is what I would be asking. What about refinance or pay down mortgage? Now, one of these things are very different. Refinance is going to bring down your mortgage payment. If you're taking it, say, from a 6% to a 4%, obviously that's going to save you around $150 a month, which is great. Hopefully we'll see 4% again sometime soon. But regardless, I think refinancing is good for some people. And then also, what's not going to really help you with cash flow immediately, but in the long term, if you have excess cash, you can begin paying down that mortgage in greater amounts. Just look at this. An extra $200 a month can save $20,000 over 15 years. That's pretty strong. Because what you're doing is you're going to take that from 15 years, you're going to shrink that amount you're paying the loan term down significantly, and you save $20,000 in interest. I mean, it's a fantastic way to do it. So it's not going to help you in the front end with cash flow, but in the back end, it's going to help you. And ultimately, that's what most rental investors want. They want to paid off properties. All right, so that's it. Those are the 5 things that we think will help you increase cash flow either immediately or over the long term of owning rental property. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel, and we'll be back with more investor-friendly videos just like this.